All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the final session of the conference. We're going to be talking about Fire-Hardened Trails and California's joint strategy. My name's Stew McMorrow. I'm the president of the California Mountain Biking Coalition, and we're a group of 39 stewardship organizations around the state. I'm also president of CORB, a Concerned Off-Road Bicyclists Association, working in the Santa Monica Mountains, San Gabriel Mountains, and LA County. And This presentation has come about because we've all seen the dramatic increase in fire and extreme fire events, especially in my neighborhood in LA and in the Palisades and Eaton fires this year. So I think this presentation is extremely timely. I'm also going to be joined by Stew McMorrow from the Sierra Buttes Trail Stewardship and John Wentworth from the City of Mammoth Lakes and the Mammoth Lakes Trails and Public Access Foundation. But I'll hand it over to Stew, who's going to get us going on what a fire-hardened trail is and how this all came about and what the potential benefits to trails and recreation will be. Stew.
Thanks, everybody. Again, thank you so much for hanging out to basically the last presentation for the conference here. I often say that people will only remember the first person and the last person in a race, and so we'll see. In that last picture, I pride myself, so far in my whole career, I've never had an actual headshot. I still have pictures of myself on a bike, so I'm proud of that. A little bit about me before you start to listen to what I have to say. I am brand new to the trails world. I am not brand new to using trails. I've been mountain biking since 1985, I think, and I call myself a self-funded professional mountain biker. Self-funded because I don't get paid to do it, and professional because I do it for a living. And what I mean is, I think mountain biking has pretty much saved my life throughout the 40 years of mountain biking that I've done. It gives me that time to relax. And that's why I love trails, because it connects us to that natural world, and that's what's important to me. I'm also on the board of directors for the Sierra Buttes Trail Stewardship. I know many of you know about our organization. I'm new to that board. And I say that I am a user, meaning my whole career as a trail user, I've been giving back money-wise, but I'm finally in a place in my life where I can actually give back physically, and so I pay them to volunteer for them on their board. And yeah, we're going to be talking about Fire-Hardened Trails. Next slide, please. But a little bit about our organization. I'm not going to linger on this, but this is a really impressive organization that we have there. We have about, it fluctuates, but we have about 50 employees, including 3 professional trail crews, and if you also include our youth crews that go out and build trail all summer long, and young people that are still in high school develop a sense of place and pride about where they live and what they've done, and I think that stuff's really cool. But since 2003, you can see we built over 200 miles of trail. I know you guys know about Downeyville, and another emerging, if not current, mountain bike and trail destination is Quincy and the whole Plumas County area. So we're in Plumas County and Sierra County mostly. Back just one slide really quick. In 2024, we built 22 miles of new trail. If you want to go see some awesome stuff, come on up and we'll have a good time with you. And so we have several events. Next slide. And we have some of the features in our landscape. This is the top of Mount Huff. So you're looking down at 4,000 feet of relief down to the Indian Valley down there. Mississippi providers that are just about to launch off Mount Huff, 4,000 foot descent, 12 to 17 miles of downhill in one go. We also run the Lost and Found Gravel Festival out of the Portola area, and this is a view looking from some of the trails in that gravel festival. This is the Sierra Valley, the biggest alpine valley in the Sierras. And then, next slide. And we also operate the Downeyville Classic Mountain Bike Race, which has been going for 25 years or so, and we have a lot of fun. This was from last year, and this is a jump, the river jump. And I remember the first time I ever came to the Downeyville Classic, the very first one, we built this, built this rickety plywood jump, and it launches into this big swimming hole in the river, and it is fantastic to watch. And that's Josh Kruger, one of our trail guys, and now we call him Kruger Airlines for that jump. I was there for that. It was amazing. So we have a good time, but one thing, thank you. One thing that I have found, and I didn't tell you all about myself. I work for CAL FIRE. I'm a forester, registered professional forester, and I'm also a firefighter. I've been a firefighter for on and off for 30 years. I've worked for 5 different fire agencies. So I'm new to your group. I'm new here. I'm having a really good time. This is the first time I've gone to a conference that didn't relate to my job. But we know, and I have experienced living in small towns, that small towns and our communities are so inseparably tied to the landscape around them. And this was really critical back in the days when there were tribes on this landscape and they were living and breathing from the landscape. If the landscape was not healthy, they were not healthy, and vice versa. And that's still true today. That's Quincy down in the valley there, and this is just a view looking down Mount Huff. That community, when things go wrong, that community feels it. And it's the same as the LA Basin community, if you want to call this one big community. And we experienced that in January. I was a firefighter on the Palisades fire. We've experienced this so many times. Sometimes we forget about that connection when we are so embedded in our human landscape, right? But it's still there. Next slide. We are seeing a lot of changes with the land right now. We have climate change. We don't need to argue about why it's happening. It's measurable, it's happening, right? And that's manifesting itself in dead trees and many, many other ways. But as a forester, I'm looking at this. Those are all dead trees, by the way. Next slide. And it manifests itself in effects on the landscape that affect us, right? So climate change, dead trees, wildfire, it's affecting people as well. So goes the land, so goes the people is a motto that I did not make up, but I think about it a lot. Next slide. And our trails, and this is a trail on in the Downeyville area. But our trails are that common thread, right? That just like this river that brings water and nutrients down the valley to our communities, these trails are that thread that bring us back up into the mountains for so many different benefits for ourselves, right? And we know this. I know I'm speaking to the choir, right? But sometimes things happen that remind you that you are so connected to the landscape.
Oppressive heat that's taking hold from coast to coast. Tinderbox conditions out in California, fueling a wildfire.
Latest with the Dixie Fire, which has grown by more than 70,000 acres overnight.
450,000 acres.
Now officially a mega fire.
The largest single wildfire in California history.
Most of these systems have missed between 3 and maybe 6 or 7 burns that they would have had naturally, coupled with what we're seeing with some of these long-term climate change effects, create these fires that are just harder and harder to manage and burn with higher and higher severity.
When those fires were going, it changed our life. You know, like we were completely smoked out. Like we couldn't see the sun, you couldn't see across the street. And we went from 52 employees down to 13 overnight because of that fire.
So we're seeing this too dangerous, right? We all know that. And it affects not only our trail organizations, our agencies, our communities. And so this is Plumas County, the Plumas National Forest. You can see just how much of this has burned. And so this got us thinking, that person, Jason Mogados, who was speaking there, he is a fire researcher, and him and a couple of other people from the Quincy area and myself have developed the Fire-Hardened Trail concept. And really, as a forester and a firefighter myself, this isn't new, right? We utilize trails on the landscape all the time to break up management blocks for things that we do. But why not use that to manage why not use that management approach to hold up our trails as these critical facilities on the landscape? Because that's what they are. When I'm a firefighter and I'm out doing my work, you can change the slide. We will often find that fire will like stop at a trail sometimes, or we use, the firefighters will use the trail for ingress and egress. Sometimes dozers will just plow right over our trail because it's in a good place on the landscape, right? That tells us something. We can be very sad about how much money was just blown off the front of a dozer blade. I get that. But also that tells us something about where that trail was located and how we can pivot that into an important thing. So this is one of our trails, the Indian Falls Ridge Trail. I highly recommend you go check it out. But that was when we were building it, and this is soon after the fire, right? You can see the difference here. And there is a quote or a concept called solastalgia. Has anybody ever heard that term before, solastalgia? I know you've heard the term nostalgia, but solastalgia is that negative feeling of distress that people feel when a landscape that they love has changed in a negative way. Turn this light. This is the same spot on that same trail, right, before and after the fire. Epically beautiful place, and I would venture to say it still is. But we look at things like this and we go, okay, the trail's gone, it's all destroyed, right? And it's not always the case. But we can take action so that that doesn't happen. We as humans love to value things in nature based on how it affects us and how we interact with it, right? And we have things like good plants and bad plants. We have bad fire, we have good fire, right? Nature kind of doesn't care. It's us who care. And we argue about that sometimes. We have actions that we take that people don't want to see us do this, people do want us to see that, want us to do this and that and the other thing. And it really comes down to our perception. So how do we turn this into something that is meaningful and useful for us? So next slide. So we've created this Fire-Hardened Trail prescription, forward-thinking approach that not only protects trails and communities from the increasing threat of high-severity wildfire, but promotes the resilience of the entire ecosystem, right? This is a way for us to take those trails, recognize them for the important value that they are, and do things around those trails so that we can reduce the impacts of wildfire. We all have seen fire blow over highways. We've seen it. I've seen it blow over entire neighborhoods across ski resorts. I've seen it blow from one side of the Sierras to the other side of the Sierras, right? That's high intensity situation. That's not always the case all the time with a wildfire. When you watch the news and you're 10 days into knowing a fire is going on and they keep showing that clip of raging wildfire and all this, right? It's not always how it is. The fire blows up and it slows down. Those places where it slows down, we can catch that easily with a 2-foot scrape on the ground. And guess what? That's what a fire line is. It's a handful of people going through the forest, cutting brush and scraping the ground back and leaving, and the fire gets up to that. If it's low intensity or medium intensity, it stops it. So why not do that on the landscape now, right? Next slide. So we start with a 100-foot wide corridor as what we call a fuel break. Please do not, in your mind, go straight to a clear cut. It's not a clear cut, not even close. A fuel break is when you reduce the fuels so that you can get in there as a firefighter and you can take action. It doesn't mean that we're going to stand there and wait for the fire to get there. What they'll do is they'll start strip firing back downhill from that point, in this particular case, and take what is a 2 or 3 foot scrape and turn it into a 100-foot wide deep black line. So when the fire does move up that landscape, maybe it creeps up that hill, it's going to stop way down here well before it gets there, and they'll be sitting there, hopefully with plumbing in place, and they'll put the fire out. If we do this work before they have to do that, it's just one less step they got to take, right? And so we can do that while we're building the trail. That's our friend Mandy. I'm sure some of you know her. So please pardon we are just a nonprofit. Please pardon our graphics here. So this is just your basic 100-foot.
That's the.
Yeah, got hot. So it's our basic 100-foot wide corridor. Okay. Now this is just for argument's sake, right? And what you're going to see here, again, please don't think clear cut, because I really need to work on these graphics. This is only the second time I've done this, right? So we have a reduced ignition zone that is 30 feet with the center line of the trail, so 15 feet either side, right? And that is intended for any ignition that starts there to not go past that, right? We all know trail users start fires along the trail. Easy enough. Then we have a 100-foot wide corridor, 50 feet on either side of that. I think next slide, please. That we call the limited spread zone. Got to put names to these things. I did defensible space inspections in the Tahoe Basin for years. I had a whole crew of people that did it. And so we really just based this around basic defensible space around your house. And when all of you did your defensible space, right, you know that there's gradations on that theme. And so that's all this is. And so some of the key points of this prescription are that you want to have a spacing between the tree canopies on steep slopes. We went with 20 feet. That's actually a standard, right? Next slide. When you get down on flat slopes, and especially in that reduced ignition zone, you try and keep 10 feet between the branch tips of these trees. And the reason you're separating these tree canopies is because when the canopy catches fire, it immediately can spread to other trees. Basic concept, right? It's one of the ways fire moves. We also want to limb up the trees in this area, right? Another basic scenario that keeps fire from spreading up into the canopy. Fire's going to happen, just like it's going to rain again this weekend on my bikepacking trip. But it's going to happen, so let's plan for it, right? And fire starts small. Imagine a match that you drop on the ground that becomes the Palisade fire. That's not how it happened, that's not what I'm saying, but that's what fire does. And so if we can keep it small and keep it from spreading, that's the point of all of this. Next slide. So we also want to, and this arrow needs to be like that, but if you have brush underneath trees, you want to roughly try and get a canopy spacing 3 times the height of the brush if you keep it under the tree, right? This bush you'll see is outside of that reduced ignition zone. We really don't want to see any brush under those trees if you can help it. You might have brush in between the trees a little bit, and all of these scenarios this is all just a concept. You don't have to follow this to the T. You just have to think about this, because every landscape's different. On these lower slopes, we just stick with a 10-foot spacing for those tree canopies. I can go to the next slide. Oh, and then of course, disposing of the slabs. So that's probably one of the hardest parts here. We get out and cut this stuff. How do we get rid of it? And please understand that it's a kind of a concept that a lot of people don't get. When you cut vegetation and you put it somewhere else, you haven't actually reduced the fuels. You just moved them around a little bit, right? You still have to get rid of them. I've seen fires in the Tahoe Basin that pretty much moved because there was piles everywhere, right? We didn't have time to get to them. So that's a critical part of this. Get rid of the slash. So next one. So this is just a slightly different way to look at this. Again, the reduced ignition zone. I didn't talk about this, but you really want to get those small trees out of there. I'm thinking like the mid-slope of the Sierra Nevadas, right? White fir grows like crazy under the canopy of everything else. Get that stuff out of there. And get rid of the dead and down material in that little zone. It's only 15 feet either side of the trail. It's really not that far, but it makes a huge difference. And then we go back to the limbing the trees up, and you don't want to turn them into little popsicle sticks, just 1/3 the height of the tree or 6 feet or so, really relative to what's underneath them, right? Really try and get rid of those dead trees though. Anything less than 12 inches DBH is a no-brainer, right? Anything bigger than that, and you're really starting to infringe on wildlife habitat, so you got to consider what you're cutting down. And of course, that's going to be dictated by your permitting and the agency who owns the land too. Try and remove large snags if it looks like they're going to fall into your trail, because they're going to at some point, right? And I used to be a wildlife biologist for state parks, and I often thought, and others do too, that a standing dead tree and a down dead tree they occupy different niches for wildlife habitat. Just different animals are using them. They're still very important on the ground or standing, right? Anyway, next slide. So what does it look like? It can be rough, especially when you start from zero, right? This is, I think this is in the South Park area. And so this can be overwhelming, right? Do you need to do all of this right at once? No. Actually, if you had to start somewhere, start on that ignition, reduced ignition zone, or what did I call it? Start on the 30-foot zone. Sorry, I'm having a hard time finding my adult words. Start in that 30-foot zone. Start with the small stuff. It's easy to get. Weed whackers sometimes with a metal blade can get the brush that you need done, And electric chainsaws can do the limbing really quick. And now you've just done so much good for keeping the fire on the ground and small. Just keep thinking about that. Keep the fire down, like a dog. And so, okay, we burn the piles, but we can also use this for prescribed fire management. This, you're going to see more of this. If you don't like smoke, don't go into the mountains. That's all I can say at this point, because we have to do this. Burning, prescribed burning and controlled burning. This is prescribed burning. That is controlled burning, by the way. When we prescribe fire across the landscape, it's like a doctor. It's sick, we're trying to make it better. This is just controlling the removal of that material. Now you guys are all foresters with a small mouth. You can also just use volunteers, just chip the stuff. Chipping is a great way to get rid of the material. Sometimes it can be a little ugly. Don't chip everything into a pile. It takes a few years for your eye to not see it anymore. This is in Placer County where I live, and we were doing work on some Placer Land Trust land, doing fuels reduction work. So worked really well. This is a track chipper, by the way. It's run by remote control. I'm sure you guys have seen that. Anyway, next slide. This is what it can look like in a mixed oak woodland. So you can see, you probably can't quite tell, there's a lot of chipped material down here. They really went through this and nailed it, right? But you're also seeing that there's actually small trees in here, but there's no ladder fuels, right? So you don't have to follow this prescription to the T to affect it the same way. Over here, it's been hit by goats. We use goats in Auburn a lot, and they work really well. Some things they don't want to eat, but if you leave them there long enough and they got no other food, they're going to start eating it. You need to pull them out when they start eating the bark off the trees. Other environments, they kind of lend themselves to not needing to cut down a whole bunch of trees also, right? Like this is anyone here from Marin? Anybody recognize Tamarancho? That's Tamarancho back there, Chief. I did a bike ride through there, a forestry bike ride, a field tour, and I couldn't help but think that that is already more or less fire hardened, because if a fire is moving through on the ground, low down, it's not going to jump that line most likely, right? If it's low intensity, which there's a lot of low intensity fire out there. This is actually up in Montana. But you could see in here, like, removing this dead material and maybe selectively removing a couple of these little trees, because you do want to think about the next crop of trees sometimes. But we're just talking about your trail. We're not talking about the landscape here, right? You can take more out in that trail corridor. And then there's cases like this where, like I was talking about, the fire stopped itself. This was a wildfire in Auburn. And that grass is probably a negative number on the fuel moisture index. I mean, that is like as dry as it gets, right? And this was probably a 100-degree day. The fire backed itself down to the trail and stopped. We didn't do anything. There was no firefighter there. Fire just stopped. Well, look at that. And then there's some cases, the Big Hill property in Placer County also, you're not going to do a heck of a lot here to make the situation any better. It's already pretty good. The problem, though, is that grass grows up, right? And this is where you need to be strategic. Do you bother? Because what are you going to do? Are you going to spray the grass for 15 feet in either place and make a swath of death under the auspices of fire hardening this trail? You might be better off to find another place to do that. So that brings up the idea of where do you do this? You want to work with your local fire district or fire authority, talk to them about what's important to them, and bring this up to them. This is a fantastic place for us to partner with our fire protection partners. They have money. They want to see unique things happen. So, think about it. This is our prescription, basic stuff. We wrote it so that you could plop it right into a NEPA or CEQA document. And again, you don't have to do all of these things all the time. You can start with that reduced ignition zone first. If that's all you can do that. Okay, next slide. And I have a link for those of you that are taking pictures. There's a QR code coming up in a second. One other thing I want to talk about, and this talks about post-fire recovery, right? One of the worst things that can happen to us as a community, besides the fire, is that they keep our public lands closed for a really long time, sometimes longer than is needed. And I'm just a person with an opinion, right? And I see what it looks like, and I'm like, why are we still keeping this closed? It's because it's easier to do that, and it's public safety. I'm not here to criticize, but I'm here to question. And is there some way, after we do this work, maybe it will result in the trail being opened faster because we don't have so many trees that are going to fall over the trail, and all these things are going to happen. And I'm a reforestation guy with CAL FIRE too. You can use these trails as a linear founder's grove. If you don't have the money to reforest this landscape across the board, you can put in a founder's grove, which is basically you plant trees in small areas so that those trees grow up fast and start dropping cones, which mean they start planting new trees. When you have vast landscapes that are smoked by a wildfire, don't kid yourself, it's not coming back as trees anytime soon if there's no seed source. Tree seeds do not persist in the ground. The weeds and the brush do, and they do an excellent job of coming back, and they make the fire condition even worse. So you can actually reverse, you can actually do, the photo negative thing. You can reverse this after a fire and you can plant trees along your trail and cut the brush back that's coming in to compete with those trees. And now you've got a linear founder's grove starting too. And it makes it nicer for the trail user. Excellent. One last little video clip. I hope you guys enjoy this. This is from a movie called Fire Lines that Patagonia did for us. So I recommend you check it out.
This region has been hard hit through loss of jobs and loss of population. For generations, people have been here to take the minerals and take the trees, but it's certainly time to start giving back. Started to piece together in my mind like mountain biking and recreation could actually make a difference. And if trails provide that avenue to care about this place, then that's the tool that we need. We want to connect these towns with trails. Really creating a trails master plan for the region and create main street trailheads that people can either hike to or bike to right from the main street of the community.
Yeah, integrating fire management into this trail network, like thinking ahead, really seems to make a lot of sense. This is a giant area.
A big component is going to be these fire-hardened trails. So within the 100-foot wide corridor that we're doing all the surveys for wildlife, botany, hydrology, and archaeology, we're going to then provide a prescription that allows us to limb up the trees, space the trees so that they can be healthy, get rid of all the ladder fuels, as well as the deadfall, and do some mastication and some underburning so those trails can be used for back burning and control points in case of a fire. This isn't a new concept. Trails have been used for forest management and for migration for thousands of years here. If all 550 miles of trail was a fire-hardened corridor, it's a good jump on things. While that's only a 30-inch wide trail, that's also a 100-foot wide corridor of healthy forest that can help save a community, but it can also help educate millions of people and bring a lot of people together that maybe didn't think trails were important.
So that's all I've got. This is a QR code for our prescription. It's easily found online if you just Google Fire-Hardened Trails. It comes right up on our website also. Thank you so much for the attention and letting me talk about this. I'm really stoked to be able to combine forestry and trails. Thanks.
Thank you, Stew. So this is not a new concept. There's a picture on this slide that is the Skyline Trail in the San Bernardino National Forest, just south of Big Bear Lake. And when this was done in 2013, it opened to the public, but the National Forest had created a 100-yard wide shaded fuel break along the ridge line just south of Big Bear Lake. Then the local trails organization, the Bear Valley Trails Foundation, Big Bear Valley Trails Foundation, they decided that this would be a great place for a trail. And so they went in, IMBA came out and did an initial rough alignment on the trail. And then Hans from Belfry Contractors, where are you? He's in here, he built the trail. But you can see how from Stew's prescription, the remove of the underbrush, the limbing of the trees up to a certain height, and it's one of the most popular showcase trails in that area now. It's the prime trail that brings people to the area, and it also connects to a number of other trails and creates a wonderful network. And they used the same NEPA analysis that they did for the fuel break, or the shaded fuel break was used to build the trail. So that there was some economy in that they didn't have to do a whole new NEPA analysis to do it. But what are some of the advantages? Well, when you clear out the underbrush, you have enhanced sight lines. So that means that you can have better sight lines. People feel more comfortable on the trails. People who may not feel comfortable in closed-in brush because they might be scared of snakes. This open landscape makes it a much more enjoyable experience for trail users. And with the sight lines, you can have multiple use on the trail, bi-directional trails, and people can see each other from a distance. So it really reduces conflict as well. And the other thing that it does is when you have trails up on the hillside, if you're clearing the underbrush, you're creating a whole new experience by exposing the viewshed that might be obscured by the low brush. So there are certainly some advantages in that sense. And when you do clear out those things, you're mitigating deadfall and widowmakers. So this trail, these two trees are on the Veta Mountain Trail in the Angeles National Forest. They burned in 2009 in the station fire. This photo was taken in 2016, 7 years later. So 7 years after the fire, we're still dealing with the deadfall. And that trail is not open yet because it also burned in a subsequent fire. Again, it's another couple of trees on the same trail, again 7 years after the fire. And the other thing that it does is people, as Stew mentioned, the agencies want to keep the trails closed for public safety for a long time. And one of the reasons they want to keep them closed is because of deadfall and widowmakers. So if you're not aware of what a widowmaker is, this outlined up here, that's a dead branch that's stuck up in the trees. If you're riding along the trail underneath that and a breeze comes up, the tree ages out, those can fall on the trail or on people below. The same with the one on the right there. And we call them widowmakers for a reason. And if you're thinning out the brush and giving that 20-foot or 10-foot spacing between the crown, you're reducing the need for keeping the trails closed as long as they have to be. And one of the other advantages is that when we're trying to protect communities with these fuel breaks, they're generally around the communities or in close proximity to the communities. But that's also where people want trails. People want trails that they can get to from their homes and to have access to nature. So the photo in this one is a dozer line that was cut during the Woolsey fire in the Santa Monica Mountains. But guess what people did? There's a fire road down here, but why don't we go up here over the dozer line that's all exposed? So people have always used and seen these fuel breaks and dozer lines and wanted to access them. And again, this is a fuel break in the San Gabriel Mountains just north of Silmar. And if you can see it there's 3 people on bikes riding down this 100% grade fuel break because that's what people do and want to do it. The other photo is a fuel break in the Verdugo Mountains in Los Angeles. And people are riding those fire breaks too. Almost every fire break or fuel break, users are going to use that as a trail. So why not do that in advance to give them the experience they want? So having the dual purpose infrastructure, trails and hardening communities against fire is an advantage of these fire-hardened trails. And there is an economic efficiency in that you can combine the NEPA analysis or CEQA analysis for the fuel break, and then you've done most of the work that's needed to get the trail on the ground. You do need to do an archaeological study as well, but that is a greatly reduced upfront cost of getting the plan together for the trail. And this aligns with forest resilience. So this was a project. This is Hans in the photo up here when we were riding through Mount Hillier, and the Forest Service was doing a fuels reduction up there, fuels reduction treatment, and there's a trail right through there. So they essentially brushed the trail for us. So we don't have to go in and brush that trail with our volunteer crews. So these are just some of the advantages to trails. Plus, they give you all the usual benefits associated with trails. They're good for community health. They're good for social cohesion. There's educational opportunities through interpretive signage and workshops and programs, and the economic stability that we all know that bring to especially rural communities. Trails are an economic driver of economic resilience. So with that, I'll turn it over to John, and we're going to hear about how these fire-hardened trails fit into some of the statewide strategies that are currently being worked on and implemented. John.
Thank you. Good morning. We're not there yet. Great to be here, and it's great to be here in a room with such profound expertise. And you've heard from two of the best in the state, maybe in the country. Practitioners on the ground doing things that matter to the future of recreation, trails, and our economies. And so we'll go to the next slide. And I'm going to talk a little bit about a document that was published by the California Wildfire Task Force, which is California's Joint Strategy for Sustainable Outdoor Recreation and Wildfire Resilience. It's one of 99 key actions from their Forest Action Plan. And this starts bringing together an opportunity at a high level to bring the expertise of practitioners like Stu and Steve here and all of you in the room to start putting together actionable plans and strategies to deal with the wildfire crisis in communities across the state. So next slide, please. My name is John Wentworth from Mammoth Lakes. We pulled together a trail system in Mammoth. It was primarily about backcountry access and front country trail systems. Next slide, please. And it was not a whole lot of new construction. It was about trying to make a mess, trying to take a mess and making something that was not a mess out of a mess. As you can see here, we've got multiple jurisdictions, multiple Forest Service units, wilderness areas. All of it was just there, and no one knew how to get anywhere, and there was a lot of conflict. So next slide, please. We got together and we turned into the Mammoth Lakes Trail System. Coordinated information sharing, new trails are being built, but it's probably a lot of your communities, it's the same kind of thing. Taking existing infrastructure and put it into something that makes some sense. Next slide, please. The work we were doing there in Mammoth Lakes, we looked around the other states, and I'm sure a lot of you are aware of offices of outdoor recreation. There's a home for trails and recreation in other states. There really isn't that here in the state of California. And so part of the problem seemed to be making an alignment between state policy, the values of all of us as Californians, and what is happening in the recreation space, the recreation universe. Next slide, please. And this, we put this together during COVID. Obviously, that's when all good things happen, is during COVID. And we took all the great policy initiatives coming out of the state in a situation where in a small town like Mammoth Lakes, we're getting overwhelmed by people going, oh my God, the world is coming to an end. I got to get back to nature and say goodbye before I go. So they're coming up, they're overwhelming our communities and our infrastructure and the rest of it. Next slide, please. And we really started to say, look, how do we start aligning the values of the recreation and trails community with the values of the state of California? What is the role of state leadership in all this? How do we build collaborative capacity to work with the Forest Service, with the federal agencies to make these things possible? And there was an initiative that was starting back then around Regions Rise Together, which has been translated now into the California Jobs First program. So next slide, please, Steve. And there was a very interesting process, a very interesting document. That document led to a gentleman named Patrick Wright, who's the head of the Wildfire Task Force, calling us up and saying, hey, we've got a thing we have to do as part of this action plan for wildfire in California. Would you be willing to help us out with that? Sure, of course. Recreation people are suckers for doing things that there's no money in, but it's going to advance what we're doing. So yeah, of course we showed up for it. Next slide, please. And this was the The action item in their plan was to develop a joint strategy to improve access to sustainable recreation. Sure, we're in. Let's do it. Next slide, please. Next slide. That's just an emphasis slide. So MLTPA and our friends and partners, we got together and we put together a key working group, which is a foundational element of part of the Wildfire Task Force, is to put these key working groups together to do this work. We assembled a lot of interesting people. Next slide, please. This included BLM folks, federal folks, LA County folks, Park Service, all of our friends and neighbors. Got everybody together. We convened and facilitated this group over a couple of months. Next slide, please. And then we did outreach. We met with the key working group, but we reached out to user groups, trail folks all across the state to make sure that the recommendations, which you're going to hear in a second, were basically on point. It's high level, but are we in the right neighborhood? Next slide, please. And we presented this to the task force in September of 2022. I, of course, had COVID myself during that week. That was a lot of fun. Secretary Crowfoot, a good friend, Greg Williams, we all came together to present this thing. It was finally getting a policy document out of the state of California that really acknowledged outdoor recreation across the state in a way that was meaningful and tied to wildfire. Next slide, please. And this matters because we live in this beautiful state. 100 million acres of land in California, beyond the beautiful state park system, but beyond the state park system, we're all recreating in this landscape that doesn't really have a home with all the work that we're doing and the joy that we take from that. Next slide, please. And so in this joint strategy, and I'll go through this relatively quickly. There'll be a QR code at the end. Stu and I are big fans of QR codes. Get that at the end. But the challenge is a strategic change in California's approach to sustainable outdoor recreation and wildfire resilience, bringing these things together because nothing exists in the silo. Next slide, please. So I'll go through this, just a quick overview of what's in the document. There are 4 goals. Each one of them has a uniquely beautiful photograph to go with it so that you're seduced by it into reading it and you'll ingest it and you'll do something with it. Next slide, please. So the first goal is to integrate forest health and sustainable outdoor recreation. Integrate them, just as Stu's doing, just as Steve is doing. There are 12 key actions. These are just examples of those key actions. The next goal, advance inclusion and access for all throughout California, a key value and goal of all of us as Californians. Bring these things together. Next slide, please. 7 key actions. Minimize impact of wildfire-related area and facility closures to public access and recreational use. These are all high-level goals, things that we're trying to get to that are articulated as key actions. Next slide, please. Promote the health and well-being of all Californians through outdoor recreation. This is a significant photograph because when there are wildfires up in the mountains, out in the natural areas, this smoke travels. And all of you live in the Bay Area, you live in LA, you know what this is about. This is not a localized little thing that's happening out somewhere, it's affecting all of us. Next slide, please. Again, some basic examples of the key actions that are in the strategy. I'm not gonna start reading a bunch of stuff to you, but you can get an idea of what these things look like. Next slide, please. And then obviously support economies to enhance sustainable outdoor recreation. Again, the community, all of us as a community, we share photographs, we share action models that are out on site, and that's kind of what we do. But you can look at the key actions, samples of the key actions that come with this slide. Next slide, please. Provide technical assistance to local businesses. Develop post-fire insurance program for the outdoor recreation economy. Again, high-level policy type things that we need to put meat on these bones to make them actionable for things that happen on the ground. And the kind of work you heard about today, these are the kinds of things that go into making a playbook to make this happen. So on the implementation side, what does this look like? And you've heard, again, from Stu and Steve, the kind of things that make implementation possible. Next slide, please. And this is, Sierra Buttes is a gold standard in all this. These folks are serious, and they're coming up with really great things that we all use. But all of you in your communities and the work that you're doing this same kind of work. How do we gather this together into a playbook that's really going to be something that we can share this information to harden ourselves up from these threats for the things that we care about? Next slide, please. And so this is how the work Fire-Hardened Trails fit into key actions and goals from the joint strategy. It fits into goal number 1, design and build outdoor recreation infrastructure that is resilient to climate change and wildfire. You just heard great examples of that. Next slide, please. This is another key action, establish permanent fuel breaks proximate to recreation trails. Stu and I had not met before a task force meeting up in Tahoe back in the fall. We developed this joint strategy. They're doing their work on the ground. They come together. All of your work is doing this same kind of coming togetherness, that we can start to document this stuff so we can use it as a playbook for the work they've got to do going forward. Next slide, please. And so in Mammoth Lakes, this is an example of what we're doing in Mammoth. This is just all hot off the presses stuff. Next slide, please. We have very good friends. We all have great nonprofits and NGO organizations we work with. I run one. These guys are part of one. We're all part of these things. Called the White Bark Institute. The White Bark Institute has identified that around Mammoth Lakes, as goes Paradise, that may go Mammoth Lakes. Mammoth Lakes is the economic driver of the entire Eastern Sierra region. If that ski area burns down, if the town burns down, the whole place goes. We're all in trouble. The kinds of things we saw up in Quincy and up north, that's going to happen in that entire region. We have to do something about this wildfire threat. So they've identified what the threat basically looks like around the town, the community. Won't go into too much detail with that. Next slide. And so the town of Mammoth Lakes, and full disclosure, I serve on the town council of the town of Mammoth Lakes, so you can put the pieces together. Town of Mammoth Lakes has adopted the joint strategy as a guiding document, because we have to deal with this wildfire threat at the same time protecting and enhancing the recreation assets that make our economy possible. Makes the town's economy possible, makes our quality of life possible. These things are coming together. Adopt this damn thing. Get it on the books. Next slide, please. Because this is what is starting to happen. Working with the Forest Service and other partners, these are the units, and Stu knows what all these things are. These are the treatment units around the town where someone's going to show up with the chainsaws and the trucks and the loaders and the scrapers to mitigate this wildfire threat. What do we do with our recreation assets while all this kind of stuff is happening? Next slide, please. So I have a lot of data. We have all got GIS data that I could lay over that entire map we just saw. That shows where all the trails are, where all the bathrooms are, where all the parking areas are, where all the campgrounds are, so that when the fuel treatments happen, they're not going to just denigrate the recreation assets. We can enhance them. But here's a quick example of what we can do. So this is the multi-use path system around the town of Mammoth Lakes. It's kind of the heart of the urban part of the Mammoth Lakes Trail system. Next slide, please. And just in the last couple of weeks, okay, we're going to start putting brush treatments and corridors and these things that are highlighted in yellow. It's the first step, but you got to start somewhere. To start doing these things, using the recreation infrastructure to do the kinds of things that Stu was just telling you about. It's a first step. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, in the Eastern Sierra region, recreation is what we do. There's only 30,000 people up there, but there's a visitor audience of 7 million, I think, estimated. Next slide, please. So I got ahead of myself. But you can see, here's the Eastern Sierra region from Alpine, Mono, Inyo counties. But again, 30,000, 35,000 base population, 7 million people come through every year to have experiences that make their lives meaningful. And they'll spend a couple bucks in a hotel, they'll spend a couple bucks in a restaurant. Next slide, please. And so the CalReg vision is now doing what we need to do to get this thing adopted by jurisdictions across the state. Next slide, please. So this QR code, wait for it, it's coming right up. You can go to a page for the places that you love to recreate and where you live to put together a little toolkit to get this joint strategy adopted. So the great work of Steve and Stu comes into your communities to harden your communities up against these threats. Next slide, please. We all know what's going on. The crazy is coming to our communities and the places we love. And if you've got something on the books that says, okay, you're going to come cut all the trees down, that's nice. We've got a campground over here. We've got a trail system over here. We've got some bathrooms over here. Do not mess with those things. If you got something on the books, it's going to help. Next slide, please. And so far, town of Mammoth Lakes, Eastern Sierra Council governments, Inyo County, Mono County, Madera County is going to vote, I think in May. We're talking to Nevada County. Anybody up here got a jurisdiction you want to get this thing on the books? You can come see me afterwards, and there'll be a QR code coming right up here in a second. Steve, next slide. There it is. Yeah, put those damn phones up there and take a picture of it. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
All right, with that, you can see how the synergy between trails, forest resilience, recreation, rural economies, public health and well-being, they all overlap, they all work with each other and support each other when they're planned around those things. So with that, we'll take any questions and open up for questions. Sarah.
The short answer is no, but the longer answer is not yet. So we're really trying to promote this idea and get everybody thinking about this and make it so that you can approach it in a way that makes sense to your region, right? As you mentioned, the shrublands, the chaparral areas. Take the Palisades fire, just is fresh on my mind still, right? There's very little forest there, right? There's a lot of grass and brush. So what could have been done there in the conditions that existed there with nothing, right? Parks really couldn't do a heck of a lot there. But there are places where you have constant chaparral fields where you could thin that out a little bit, right? But you have to remember that when fire burns, it's usually burning twice the height of the fuel that it's burning, right? So if you have chaparral this high, and you probably know this well, your flame lengths are going to be so big, it may not matter. Like in some cases, it's just that prescription's not going to help. And so it really just has to be applied in your vegetation type in a way that you think makes sense. Talk to the forest, the fire managers. Right? I'm happy to talk to you later about that question because I don't manage statewide issues from a fire perspective as a forester for CAL FIRE. I have my reforestation program, private landowner assistance, and I issue grants for that stuff. So I'm trying to push this narrative of thinking about trails in this way. Because we think about roads in this way, right? We'll do this kind of stuff along roads. I have to think.
Yes.
I think the question's for Stew, but I'm curious about the environmental analysis that kind of goes into Fire-Hardened Trails. I'm not a forestry background, so I don't know much about how that works, but just curious what perspective is, what perspective you say about that.
It's really not a heck of a lot different. If you were to do a CEQA, I'm just going to stick with CEQA because that's my jam. BIPA is for the feds. It's a very similar concept, right? If you're going to propose a fuel break or something in an area, you do the biological, the archaeological, you do all these evaluations, and then you select an appropriate document to push it through. If you don't have to mitigate any potential issues, then you can get by with a categorical exemption, for instance, right? And so if you apply that same concept to a trail, it's pretty straightforward and seamless. It's the same thing. In fact, it's a lot smaller because it's a linear approach versus like a 100-acre area, right? So it's that prescription we have. You can plot that right into a NEPA or CEQA document. Go, yep, this is how we're going to do it. And as those of you that have done NEPA or CEQA, you know that you don't have to actually take all of those actions all the time, but now you have the environmental clearance to do it, right? So, very straightforward. I think it's straightforward because I've done a lot of these types of projects, right? Vegetation management. It's a minor alteration to land, is basically what it is under CEQA, categorical exemption. But you have to have the review, the environmental review, to back up that claim, and the person or the entity who is the lead agency who submits that CEQA document, takes responsibility for it. You got to talk to them and develop a personal relationship with them, and then you can move. I hope I answered your question.
And I have spoken to Greg Stenmo, who does forest resilience on the Angeles National Forest. So it's a chaparral environment in the low elevations and a montane forest in the higher elevations. And I asked him specifically about the difference between how this might be applied in chaparral versus montane forests. And he looked at it and he said exactly the same. Just the difference is in the type of vegetation that you're removing and you're reducing in that ignition zone is what is different between the two forest types. More questions? Yeah. And you next.
So the question I was asking, if you wanted to build some of your trails wider, not a single track, but a double track, potentially provision for vehicles getting in there to fight fire or maybe maintenance purposes, or who knows what. Can you? How does that look for CEQA? For permitting, how does it look also for the effectiveness as a fuel break?
There are, I'll say thousands, if not 100,000 different examples of putting in a fuel break that is drivable, because that's how we've always done it, right? What we're talking about here is considering a smaller feature on the landscape as a fuel break. So if you're going to do something that's drivable, those prescriptions just maybe expand a little bit. 100 feet is pretty good still, right? But there are fuel breaks that are 300 feet wide, 500 feet wide. It depends on what you're in. In terms of, Scott, in terms of like taking an existing facility and making it wider, I think, based on my experience doing this for quite a while, it's also can be a categorical exemption for CEQA. You just have to do that analysis to support your claim that you're not causing an impact, right? There's one fold to this, and I won't go into, but you and I can talk about it later, is the statutory exemption that occurs when there is a proclamation of a state of emergency done. And we're now using that to do fuels reduction work, where you really don't even have to file a categorical exemption. It's statutorily exempt. It's identified as something you don't have to follow. Now, our agencies, mine included, are risk averse, so we still submit this stuff. But you still have to do your review. You still have to prove and have that in your back pocket that, yeah, I'm not going to cut down any elderberries. I'm not going to hurt the XYZ, species. Archaeology's always got to be done. We always have to respect the archaeological resources that are out there, period, right? But it's the biological that we need to review.
Thanks.
Yes.
So one comment as just someone who went through the state parks trails training 2 weeks ago. Another consideration for fire is it's going to burn whatever your structures are on the trail. So culverts, bridges. If you are intending your trail to be like fire hardened or like expecting the fire to come up on it, just consider when building those structures, like is this going to be resistant or is this going to melt or have to replace that? And then I had a question about, because I know like in the biological field, I've heard a lot of people just talking about like beavers and how they like saturate water tables in parks and like create kind of fire resilient landscapes. So does your kind of fire hardening process consider like the water topography of like, oh, this area would be more saturated during the wet seasons, or is it mainly about kind of the trail focus without considering like the surrounding topography?
I think you always need to consider the special situation that you're in. And you're going to be selecting places to do this based on talking to your fire partners. And what do they think? Where are you going to put this? Because it's overwhelming to start with to look at your whole trail network that your organization might be part of and go, oh, we're trying to maintain these trails, how are we going to apply this other thing onto them, right? So pick the ones that are the highest priority, right? And of course, if you're going through a meadow or something like that, we're going to consider that. So, Steve, there was a question way back.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if you could speak to the collaboration
with tribal community? That hasn't really come up in my experience yet. Of course, I work with them in my normal profession as a forester and whatnot. And from a trails perspective, not as much, but we have the MIDU Summit Consortium in Plumas County, and we work very closely with them. And we talk to them, but some of this has actually been developed around some of the traditional ecological knowledge that they have. But one of the things that they have told us is that they had no analog for the situation that our forests are in right now. That wasn't a thing that they dealt with, where we have just these massive conflagrations because we haven't let natural fire do its thing in environments where fire is part of the ecosystem, right? So they want to help, they want to apply what they know, but in some cases they're telling us, you know, this wasn't something that we historically dealt with because they were doing things all the time. They were setting fire. So, but that's a longer conversation working with tribes. We work with them a lot in forestry.
All right, one more question and then it's time.
A request and a question. One, can I see the last QR code?
The last QR code.
And then two.
If I'll come over. If the projector doesn't work, I'll come give it to you.
Steve, since that was an easy one, we have one more question.
Oh, Wiki had a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The other one was, when we talked about like clearing out like areas for different grades,
Yeah.
we, as much as we want to, sometimes we're stuck to like that 10-foot space because the other side's cliff, this side's up.
Yeah.
What's the training called for anything like that? We love training.
What's the training called for
Is there
that?
like a training specific for grade climbing? Because we're not allowed to go pick because we're not taught how to climb up
Well,
trees.
no.
I mean, well, up high grades, up steep grades.
Yeah. Not really sure, but as an ex-trail builder myself and forest manager, you could always tie yourself off on a rope and do work. That's low angle rope work. That's LARO. It's called low angle rope rescue.
Okay.
Yeah, LARO. LARRO is the acronym for that.
Thank you.
All right, we're at time. Thank you for joining us, and I hope this was informative.